Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this second Garrod seminar of this term, second seminar of our series on organic archaeology's wetland futures. It is my enormous pleasure and great privilege to introduce to you our speaker for this week, Dr. Ben Gearey, who's come from University College Cork, all the way from Cork to speak to us today. I've known Ben for several years, but just had to look him up in more detail, stalk him a little bit just to introduce him to you. And Ben has had a really extraordinary career so far already. Been involved on some of the most important wetland archaeological projects of the last few years, should we say. So before his time at Cork, he was at Birmingham. Before that, he was at Hogl, where he was involved in the Humber Wetlands project. And before that, he was at Exeter, where he was involved in the Lachine Mines archaeological project, which is one of the most, still I think, one of the most extraordinary projects that probably needs to be better known outside of Ireland. Really fantastic. As you'll hear in a moment, Ben is an engaging speaker and a one of the best people you could possibly ever meet. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce to you Dr. Ben Gearey from University College Cork, who is going to be presenting on archaeology, absence heritage, and the Capitalocene Bog. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to see some familiar faces, some new faces. And yeah, I must admit, the title might come across as slightly pretentious, or some places a bit pretentious title. As you'll see, the title could easily be "Fun with Figurines." Okay, so we'll see that later. But anyway, let's go with the title, which seemed kind of appropriate for this seminar series. I'm just going to check my time. So yeah, archaeology, heritage, trans-disciplinarity, and the Capitalocene or Capitalocene Bog. Okay, so look, before we get going, I'm kind of going to faintly, if not define what I mean by trans-disciplinarity, but give you a kind of quote, which I hope will kind of come through in some of the work I'm going to show you. And this is kind of a bit of a smorgasbord of projects, material, people. There's lots of voices in here. Some of those people in the room, Gearey and Everett at the back, for example, my colleagues on iPeat, and also some fantastic archaeologists in their own right. So Claire Nolan, we were just talking about, Eleanor Carroll, Kathy Moore, some of you may know well, ABH, Archaeological Services in Dublin, and some other voices that will come through, as we'll see, literally, hopefully, if the videos are working. So I'm just going to read this kind of quote, so more of an approach. So, to produce knowledge amid a growing realisation that those disciplinary and epistemological boundaries are pasted across objects which are quite indifferent to a bureaucratic division between disciplines, and that scholars and researchers of all stripes invariably tend to and live among objects whose emergence, growth, development, action, and disappearance do not at all admit of neat cuts. That's Fitzgerald and Callard, book some of you may be familiar with. And just to kind of begin, this is some of Katrina Leahy's artwork. We'll come back to look at that later on. This is a detail from her art piece that's Critical Zone Bog Studies 1, 2, and 3. Another scene, we'll maybe come back to talk a bit more about that later on, and what I think this is, or why this idea may or may not help us. Okay. So let's begin with the woman herself. So the relics of early man are necessarily reduced to the imperishable parts of his culture, that is, to the most part, stone implements which can have formed a small part of his total heritage. I was looking for a kind of Garrod touchstone, and this really was the best one I could kind of find, really, in a lot of ways. And I suppose my jumping off point here is obviously this, and this is clearly this idea of absent heritage, the things obviously that don't survive. The perishables, as some people call them, the silent majority. Obviously, the theme of this seminar series. So, kind of that idea, and then what we might call, or a concept I find quite useful recently, is absence heritage, which is a paper by James Williamson et al. The accidental or purposeful erasure of tangible and or intangible elements of heritage and culture from past, current or future narratives, which can potentially cause cultural amnesia, loss of identity. So this is a bit of a Bronze Age trackway from an Irish peatland, the main bog trackway, which is largely destroyed by peat extraction. A small section was eventually excavated after a bit of an outcry. So in this case, the literal destruction of heritage in wetland areas. And I think the point here, and again, everyone in the room is familiar with this and doesn't need reminding, I'm sure, kind of both these ideas of absence and absence heritage kind of pass through each other in peatland and wetland archaeology. So this site, can't remember what it is, clearly, threats. So we have direct threats to peatland and wetland archaeology, and we have, indirect threats, drying out, and problems with preservation environments, which again threaten that kind of erasure or loss of heritage in different ways. So it's always that kind of tension, I suppose, in wetland archaeology we're all aware of, which is that almost every wetland site we ever investigate we know about because it's been impacted on already. So invariably, with a few exceptions, it's already in a state of decline and deterioration, of course. So obviously, as I'm sure a lot of us know, Ireland is nearly 20% bogland, and what has happened to most of the boglands in the centre, of course, it's called the Mona's bogs. They've been like this. They've been extremely heavily extracted, drained for peat. I think these are kind of now post-industrial landscapes, as we'll see in a minute. The upshot of this, ironically, in many ways, I suppose, from an archaeological point of view, is that the reason we know, and this is the great news, so much archaeology in Ireland's bogs is because of this extraction. So again, that theme of exposure, extraction, and destruction. Just kind of, again, we could spend ages looking at archaeology from Irish bogs. But two artifacts in particular I'm going to talk about in a minute. There's this one top left. This is the so-called Palace Boy vessel. And then we've got this unusual figurine, the Ballykeene figure, sometimes called the Red Man of Kilbeg. Both of these were exposed by peat cutting and excavated by the Irish Archaeological Wetland Unit that was based at UCD. That, of course, is a Dowrist hoard, which gives its name to the Terminal Bronze Age. So Irish bogs are obviously absolutely, stuffed full of archaeology, and a lot of that archaeology has been destroyed or lost. Very little of it is preserved in situ, and really, arguably, even less of it is on display, and even less of it has been publicly communicated, which is a theme I'll pick on in a minute. Now, as some of you might know, industrial scale peat harvesting finished in Ireland in 2019. That's brought them in, ended all the peat harvesting, or kind of did it. In recent years, this has kind of looped back around to all sorts of problems, not least the failure of the Irish state to prevent peat cutting on special areas of conservation, and that is something that that led last year. Was it last year? Yeah. To Ireland being referred to the European Court for failure to protect boglands and curb turf extraction. So yeah, this is the issue, and this is the thing with Irish peatlands, is this contestation, and as we'll see, a tension across heritage in particular. And the other irony, it's not an irony at all, that's the wrong word. Comparatively little, as I say, these archaeological remains from Irish bogs are publicly that well known. I suspect even within Ireland, you mentioned peatlands, and people go with bog bodies, of course. So it's human remains here, just in case it's offended. That's Connie Cavan Man. So more or less any time you mention a peatland in Ireland, people will go, or archaeologists will go, bog bodies. Very rare finds, extremely rare actually, in many ways. But the focus of the very good exhibition at the National Museum in Dublin, Kingship and Sacrifice. There is also the Corley Iron Age Roadway Visitor Centre. There is a conserved section of the Iron Age structure that is Corley 1. So there is and has been communication of peatland archaeology in the past, but it's been uneven in a lot of ways, and in many ways it's not reached, if you like, the broader public. this is quite ironic in many ways for me, because to go back to the end of peat cutting and the so-called Just Transition programme, which is the EU kind of strategy and funding for communities that are affected by transition to low carbon economy. So the end of peat cutting in Ireland, they actually launched the Just Transition Fund, that's called A1, ironically, and they were the ministers launching Just Transition Fund. I find that quite ironic in that really called A1, if anything, is kind of a, one of the surviving bits of peatland archaeology that are left in Ireland's bogs. And some of you might remember this graphic, I quite often show it, and this is the around about 4,000 archaeological sites in Irish peatlands, just from the Bord and the Mona bogs, that are known, been surveyed. Less than 10% of those have been excavated. Almost all of them will be destroyed or are destroyed. So, a huge issue with kind of destruction and loss of heritage. Now, to go back to contestation, here's the other things. For many people, particularly rural communities, the right to cut peat is cultural heritage. So it's an intangible cultural heritage, and you can see that very clearly there. And this has led to all sorts of bitter tensions that have got quite unpleasant in places around the end of peat cutting, on special areas of conservation, that's largely hand cutting, but also in an economic sense, just transition the end of industrial peat extraction as well. And ironically, like what we've now got appeals for the protection of the surviving infrastructure of the peat extraction industry, so the briquette factories, the railways. So this is great irony in many ways that there seems to be more voices now calling for, rightly so, calling for the memorialisation of the peat extraction industry, and hugely important in terms of the Irish state and Ireland achieving energy independence in the 1940s. So these things are enormously complex and tied together. So we might call any attempt to kind of manage and deal with this economically, socially, culturally as a wicked problem. Okay, and that's, I'm not going to say much more about that, but that's something we've written about a bit. Wicked problems that are defined by the lack of clear solutions, every problem being a symptom of another, and so forth. And again, that's something we might talk about later. And it's something that Rosie's working on in a more contemporary context as well, in terms of peatland restoration. And of course, this was intensified in the recession by the fact that a lot of people turned back to peat extraction to save on energy bills. So these are not simple kind of simple issues. So that's kind of a bit of a backdrop, and I'm kind of jumping around a bit in time in particular. But this kind of marks, I suppose, the jumping off point for the rest of the talk. And this is going back to 2015, which I thought was not long ago. Apparently, it's 10 years ago. I was just talking to Kevin, who came to we're not sure when that was. It probably that long ago. I don't know, was it? Doesn't feel like long ago. Scary. Anyway, so 10 years ago. And I hadn't been in Ireland that long at that point, and I had various conversations with various archaeologists, including Kathy, and various artists as well. I got in touch with Brian McDonald, and that led to a project that loosely began as one thing, and then kind of, I think, became something else. But it grew from conversations about, if you like, absent heritage, so about destroyed and lost organic archaeology from Irish peatlands. And this brings us to this peatland, Bog, which is the location of the aforementioned Pallasboy vessels. Pallasboy is after the townland, which is a land division in Ireland. So here's a Pallasboy vessel under excavation. It's Iron Age. It's carved from a single piece of alder that's probably about 56 years old at death or felling. I'll show you some more images of that in a minute. At the end of its life, and it had a life, evidence of it being used and repaired, it was carried out into the bog, and it was pinned down, a bit like a bog body actually, pinned down with some stakes into a pool in the bog, and it was exposed by peat cutting and excavated by the wetland unit in 2001. After that, it just went into a store in the museum. So this is what the part of the conserved vessel in the National Museum stores out in Dublin. So an artifact very much out of view. This is Kathy Moore. This is Connor McDermott, somebody you may recognise. And this is Mark Griffith, who is the woodworker. So what this led to is the Palace Boy project, which I'm going to show you a few images from that next, which essentially was based around the idea that came from a chance discussion with Mark about, some of these artifacts. I was like, well, I use the best in my teaching, and I said things about it that I didn't know if I was saying something stupid. I'm not a woodworker. How long did it take to make? Was it difficult to make it? So Mark said, well, why don't we make one? Or why don't we make a replica? Which is what we did. It's a huge backstory to this. I'm not going to go into that. So that was the project. We sourced a suitable piece of alder, and that's a story in itself. And Mark set to work in Methelmara, which is the community boatyard around the River Lee in Cork. That was a really good choice of venue. Originally, we were going to kind of do it somewhere maybe at the university. We ended up doing it at the community boatyard, and that was brilliant because there was all these connections and interests from people who were working in the boatyard. And what came of that was, here is the Palace Boy vessel. It ended up in the Cork Public Museum on Heritage Night, with a little sign saying, please do touch my nap splinters, and kind of a little bit of information around it. And what we found as well is the amount of interest. Strangely enough, when we set out to do this, to be clear, we didn't kind of think like everyone's going to be interested in us carving an old Iron Age replica, but people kind of engage with it, and that led to an open day at the museum here, and an engagement with kids in particular. What we did was, I don't know where this idea came from. We had this kind of stall, and someone said, what we should do is we'll just print out an outline of the vessel, and maybe kids will want to colour it in. But they didn't just want to colour it in, they wanted to do this. Like, they literally started imagining the vessel in its landscape. There's loads of pictures, I just pulled out two. Like this one is slightly sinister. Sick looking animal. This one, we kind of gave a prize to. It's Ben Keneally, aged 8. Was it specially crafted for a child, king, or chieftain at that time? It was a fascinating woodwork of that era. And again, this kind of really struck me, because again, when we set out doing it, I kind of thought, well, right, maybe some experimental archaeologists will be interested, and a few of them were, and maybe a few students, maybe for teaching, and that kind of work. But here was the thing, like, there was a lot of discussion about what the Palace Boy vessel was for. And we didn't really set out to work that out. But as we progressed, and as we showed it, people would come up with ideas. So some wag went, well, why don't we kind of test some of the ideas? And we were like, okay, that kind of sounds fun. So someone had said, well, maybe it was a little canoe. So we managed to persuade someone from the Cork Canoe Club to try and sail it down the River Lee. And as you can see here, it didn't work. But this is brilliant, because this is the chap who got in. He literally got in it, tipped over, and in a very Irish Cork dry way went, yep, not about. Which is fabulous. We didn't find the turret behind another vessel. It popped along quite easily. Then we did some really strange things, and this came from Brian while we crafted again. The acoustics of this are amazing. Like, so we ended up. Let's see if this works. Is it going to work? So this became a Palace Boy sounding, where we had a Cork percussionist play the vessel. This is Billy Lloyd with his replica of the shade forward. Don't ask me why. It was really fun and really interesting. What again got me was the fact that when we asked the percussionist, natively, do you want to come play a replica of Iron Age vessel? He went, didn't really ask anything else. So we did this, and this is my favourite picture. And if you don't all go, oh, then you're not paying attention. Someone said, was it a cradle, or was it? And strangely enough, a friend of one of my PhD students, they just had a baby, and he said, oh, we'd love to test the baby. So it was fantastic. So that's the Palace Boy that came named as a Palace Boy. So this is why this talk becomes slightly fun with figurines, because then we did some more figurine kind of making, and this is Kathy Moore again. I don't know if any of you saw this. It kind of hit the press. This is AMS's excavations in Ireland at the actual edge of it. This is kind of peat that goes into a river. Really interesting site. You'll hear more about it later on when it's eventually published. But what hit the press was the discovery of this. This kind of became known as the beast, and that is this figurine. This dates to 3rd to 4th century AD, so it's just on the edge of kind of St. Patrick and Christianity. It was in several sections, but we made a replica of that as well for the Rapcroft Visitor Centre. And this involved various colleagues, including Aidan O'Sullivan, who's familiar to here, and Ross Muldoon from AMS, and Eve Campbell. So we spent a weekend making this bad boy, and that was fun. And we did it, and we kind of asked me, what do you think it was for? And someone went, it's a ladder. So I don't know, absolute beast. You get there's quite a few of these kind of figurines from Irish peatlands, starting in the Bronze Age and going through now into kind of the early medieval period. The press picked up on it because they were like, oh, it's a pagan idol and all this kind of stuff. So more figurines. So what struck us is like making artifacts, particularly these artifacts that usually, you know, and I know you guys have done this for Must Farm. I know this kind of approach is not exactly new, but it was for Ireland. So it struck us that, you know, people will get very engaged watching this kind of stuff. So we got invited, and this is in June, so I'm hopping forward a bit now. So this is last June. We got invited by the Heritage Council for their European Archaeology Day in Kilkenny to repeat this process for school groups with the Ballykeene figure, the Red Man of Kilbeg I mentioned earlier. Here's Mark making it. Here's the kids gathering around. There's Claire Nolan just mentioned. Lots of kids. That was mad. What we did learn, and this is very important if you've never done this, if you have a replica Bronze Age axe and loads of kind of school kids, don't leave it somewhere where someone's going to pick it up and run after their friend with it. For a while, I could just see it flashing through my head of having to go back to UCC and speak to my head of department as to why a school child had a replica Bronze Age axe embedded in his skull. But I got away with that, fortunately. So there is the Red Man at Kilbeg, and there again, this figurine is not on display. This lives, and this is kind of looks like something from X-Files. This is the National Museum's organic material part of it in Dublin. Shelves and shelves and shelves of conserved wooden stuff. Some really weird things in there. Most of it will never see the light of day. So again, as part of the Heritage Day in June, we repeated our palace board trick, and this was also super awesome because, again, and the school kids were running around and they were kind of like that. But then some people really engaged. We said, well, we don't know what it was for. What do you think? Like, and a whole stack of these. There's just a couple. I like this one, a symbol of peace. It's Dara. Each mark represents something. These strange notches. Connor. I think it was to keep track of how many people died, or an animal was scratching it and then it fell into the bog and died. I don't know if the animal fell into the bog, but the figurine fell into the bog and died. So I don't know. So at this point, this is where Rosie hands out. So what I've brought some of these sheets. So if you want to have a think about this, as I'm talking, Rosie's going to hand out a few of these sheets. We can add this to the collection. Or if you just want to doodle on it, that's fine too. So you go. What were these things for? I'm actually genuinely interested in any of the thoughts. So what this, and again, I'm hopping around and missing bits of narrative out here and bits of connections. What this kind of led to was, through the IP project, was the sense, and this was through discussions with Ian Carney, who's the director of it, was that when we're trying to talk about these issues around Irish peatlands, around restoration, around heritage, loss, destruction, there's a lot of material in contemporary art around this, and this led to the exhibition for archaeologists at the Glucksman, which was, we in 20, 25, 22, 23, 24. Sorry, I'm completely losing track. That is a QR code. It might work. I think I used this when I was last here. It might work. It takes the page. So again, I'm not going to show you loads of pieces of art. I'm just going to show you two of my favourites. So this is what we saw at the start. This is the Katrina Leahy's critical zone bog study 1, 2, and 3. You can probably make out what this is. This is actually a photographic negative. It's a series of images or photographs of a peatland, an extracted peatland, which is cut and re-spliced in different ways. And this is kind of some of the fabric matting they kind of place on top of some of these particular bogs. And she wrote this as part of a monograph for her critical zone study. Surfaces hold and absorb what we project onto them. Far from an understanding of the surface is superficial veneer. Surface here has depth and is full of tension, which I think is absolutely a beautiful quote that we used in a recent paper. That really describes this issue of Irish peatlands and that tension at the surface around peat extraction, restoration, and all these kind of issues that kind of literally meet on the surface. I also love this piece. This was a video installation by the artist Nigel Rolfe called Into the Mire. And guess what he does in that video installation? He falls into the mire in the Bog of Allen. And it's just this kind of loop of him like falling into the bog. And it was kind of framed as a commentary at the time on the Irish economic situation. But I think like kind of most good art, for me and in the discussions around this, I think the team were like, this is a really good description, again, a really good kind of visualization of the issues around Irish peatlands and the contestations. So, you know, really beautiful piece. You kind of have to watch it in flesh to get full sense of it. Apparently, originally in '77, his solo show received aggressive negative reaction. We actually met him. Just to be clear, just to show that, like, isn't this amazing? Like, isn't art and a great way to talk about heritage and threat and challenge? As part of the Glucksman exhibition, at the end there was kind of these little handouts. We asked the visitors, you know, asked, what artifacts or natural objects do you think should be preserved? Sandra Bullock and an orca. I have no idea. I don't know. So more sensibly, what we did next with the Glucksman, we turned again back to the younger generation. They clearly have most at stake, clearly know what they're doing. We developed some kind of learning resources for the Glucksman to run through that fabulous education program, which included kind of peatland themed work. So they come and see the exhibition, and then they do these workshops with their teachers and with staff from the Glucksman. So just to be clear, I'm not at all involved in this. Is not we haven't developed the material, but and that led then to an exhibition of their work over St Patrick's weekend last year. And some of this stuff is absolutely stunning. So they're working with clay as well as kind of watercolours and so forth. And some of them made these absolutely marvellous like clay images, some of which are more obviously peatland kind of themed than others. This poor chap who's definitely been staked down to the bog. So some like, really beautiful artwork. I think that is someone sinking and stuck in a bog as well. So I think I showed this last time as well, the Black Ben thing. I love it so much. I think I mentioned that someone had done literally it was like a little cartoon book called Bogman. And I think I said I didn't have the picture. There it is. This is what Bogman does. How cool is this? This bog is over 12,000 years old. So, you know, when we talk about trying to, you know, speak to the younger generations and you know, communicate, you know, the generations that are most at stake in the climate crisis and most at stake when it comes to, you know, how I was treated to peatlands or not. You know, this felt like a really nice way into it, and I find this stuff generally moving. I really do. It's great to go and talk about peatland archaeology like we all do, Phil, and talk about the sites and talk about the records and aren't they amazing? You guys know all this. But you know, can we bring peatland back to the people? And look, we're always tied to impact agendas, aren't we? Really, like in one way or another. And I put this in here not as like isn't amazing? I was kind of impressed. So Radical Archaeologists had 29,000 visitors. I know the Must Farm exhibition had a huge number as well. So again, this is a great resource for us. It's something we need to make more of. You know, wetland archaeology, all archaeology, the wetlands. It's so immediate. It's so engaging. And we couldn't survey the school kids, unfortunately. But Claire Nolan again did some survey work with the teachers who were leading the groups in these schools. And we got some really encouraging, okay, they're not huge data sets, encouraging results. The teachers themselves are learning stuff about peatland archaeology and bogs and climate, and the sense that some of the kids are also learning that information as well. And that's secondary school kids. And again, I'm not suggesting everyone went away going, oh my God, bogs amazing, it's an archaeology great. That's kind of not the point. But it's the fact that, again, you can reach people through our work. I know we all know that, but I think the point being it's different in Ireland, and particularly when you try and talk about peatland stuff, it can be challenging. And it's difficult when you stood there with your big English head on you, as they say, telling Irish people what they should do with their cultural heritage. Okay, here we go. So, just kind of tie up in the last 10 minutes. I just want to kind of step out and step slightly away from, if you like, the engagement work with the school groups and so forth, and to look at kind of more immediate issues around peatlands in Ireland. And this is the Monaghan Bog. So as Irish peatlands are shifting from extraction to re-wetting, what else are we getting? We're getting wind farms, green energy. Where are those wind farms going? On the bogs, largely. And again, this has been hugely contentious in large parts. All sorts of arguments and issues around this. This is the Monaghan Bog. So this is some archaeological data from the Archaeology database. The Monaghan peatland is absolutely stuffed with archaeology. You can see some of it there. There's also some really interesting and important dryland archaeology here as well. Monastic settlement and so forth. So loads of archaeology here. Draft Cutaway Bog decommissioning rehab plan basically kind of says we're going to rehabilitate the peatland, but we're also going to shove some wind turbines around. Some of them are going to kind of go on the peatland. This has proved enormously controversial. So the Monaghan Bog group, who we made kind of contact with, we were particularly interested because, again, when we talk about peatland archaeology in Ireland, it's all well and good for us to go around as archaeologists and go, this is really important, it's a precious resource, yada yada. But who cares? And generally, we did not know, other than anecdotally, whether people care about this. Do people care about what's left in the bogs? Like, loads of sites have been destroyed. What remains? So again, this is Claire's work. She set up some focus groups. There's some instructed interviews where she spoke to some of the locals. This is just one extract from one of those interviews. There's a bog. Is that going to come off? Oh no, it's going right. That's meant to. That's the local schoolhouse. Their wind turbines. That's meant to go. This is one of the major sites in the Monaghan Bog. It's a multi-phase trackway goes to the medieval period. It's upstanding. Okay, not very well. It's not preserved in situ. Let's look at what is there and discover the archaeology to the left and see if any of it can make clearer pictures of the pattern of our past. It's special to us. The roots are there in the archaeology, and then of course the bog preserved it. And if the bog is dried out, then that endangers. It's going to be further drained. That's what's going to destroy what's left. So again, this might seem like quite okay, but we didn't know this. Like we had no sense really when we talk about what we might try and do with the absence archaeology or the absence archaeology. Who cares about it? Who wants to see it preserved? There's no point in us saying that if the wider public does not know about it, does not care about it. Increasingly, we get the sense that that is not the case. So it's good to collect this kind of information. What else we did as part of this was we spoke to some of the community groups that are directly involved in peatland restoration, and we did kind of some training. That's Kathy and Helen mainly in peatland archaeology, how to recognise it, and just how to use kind of online resources to research your local area. And again, there's some quotes here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but let's just go to the top one. It's given me a deep appreciation for our bogs, the heritage and the stories associated with them. Will be more likely to speak up for conservation of archaeology on bogs, raise my own awareness of peatland archaeology and so forth. And again, this is really important because as Irish bogs are shifting into restoration and rehabilitation, what loses out? Usually archaeology. Okay, we've had a bit of success in trying to kind of get that back onto the agenda. And again, this is probably an important theme for the work of Black Fen and Fend and so forth as well. Rosie again, I think just came back from the Lowland Peak conference where she spoke to a junior minister, no, civil servant. who more or less said, who cares about archaeology in bogs? So, you know, we might assume people do care and they should know, but is that always the case? Possibly not. And in passing, actually, when I was doing a bit of research around this talk and also about wetland archaeology more generally, I don't think, and maybe someone might correct me, I can't find a huge amount of papers or work that specifically looked at perception and appreciation of peatland or wetland archaeology. There might be some, I don't know. But I found this really interesting paper from Denmark. They are most based by this team, who they're not archaeologists, they're social scientists. But what the point they make here is that they talk about this. They basically say, well, how do people value stuff you can't see that's under the ground, in this case in the bog? And there seems to be, they kind of draw the conclusion that people actually do value stuff they can't see, and it's important that it's preserved in the ground. So yeah, alongside biodiversity. So it does strike me that there might be some other themes we can maybe chase here in terms of the UK. I don't know. So I just thought interested for opinions on it. Okay. So, how are we doing? So, kind of last 5 minutes. So, is that all right? Don't want to keep everyone from their why. Is that okay? So, other things we've kind of done as part of IP, and I was just saying to Phil and maybe Matt, I'm a bit fried. So, the IP project finished at the end of last year, and I had to submit the report this week. It nearly gave me a breakdown, and for various reasons, I just about got it signed. Actually, I just saw an email before I walked in here that I think UCC have signed it off. So I was jiggling yesterday with like trying to juggle sheets and costs, and you know, you get your costings through your project. You're like, have I bust the bank? Don't think so. So anyway, so something we did as part of the IP project was produce this. It's basically called Popular Publications, Origin Landscapes. Peatland Archaeology. If you click that, it should bring you to a link. Does it work? Excellent. And Rosie's got some copies of it. If anyone wants to pick one up, please do. It's in Irish as well, so it's bilingual. So it's another kind of important aspect to try to communicate heritage in Ireland. Just to be clear, I don't speak Irish. So, so that's not come up very well. Sorry, that was a very poor choice of colour. So I've kind of hopefully taken you on a bit of a kind of whirl down bog lane, so to speak. It's been a bit kind of incomplete. It's hopped around a bit, but I hope it's given you a kind of sense of what we've been doing with Irish peatland archaeology, as well as some of the issues around it, some of the resonances, and I think maybe some of the connections with the UK as well. This is a quote from a paper that we published last year. Again, Claire was the lead on this. As such, modern human and human legacies of extraction, both material and immaterial, converge to form a hybrid landscape, a unique product of the unsustainable practices that characterise the Irish Capitalocene, or Capitalocene, I even say. We use this term to describe capitalist colonial approaches to the modern human world. The outcome, many of the incisions, interventions, and decisions applied to these territories resulted in tensions that continuously shape the development of the peatscape. I hope I've given you a bit of a sense of where we're coming from with some of that, and I'm going to be really happy to talk more and to take some critiques and questions about that. But just to finish, I want to kind of loop back round a bit, and this is something I think we're all aware of, whether we're academic archaeologists, commercial archaeologists, or we sit between two, and that is like, can we escape the kind of tyranny of metrics, formal metrics, and in that sense, can we escape, I suppose, the Capitalocene Bog in that way? I think there was a comment made at the Flag Fen meeting about the challenges of rep culture in the UK, you know, the problems that brings academics. So when I think about value, something that I keep coming back to is this. So as part of the Radical Archaeology's exhibition, we tried to get some peatland artifacts to put in a case to go alongside the art. That didn't happen, just a polite way of putting it. So the curator at the Glucksman said, well, can you get just some stuff from a bog? Which again, you're like, oh, stuff. She goes, can you get some bogwood? Well, can it? Won't be very interesting. But what I did find, this is in my office, in my wood storage facility, which is a red box with some water in it, was a I think it's a bit of medieval wood from the Sheen, actually. It dried out in lockdown, and I kind of kept it. So I said, well, you can have that. And we in Radio actually went to Corley and got some fossil pine. And it got put on a table with some gloves. And apparently people loved it. Apparently kids loved it. And again, it's astonished me. I don't know why, but it was like, who wants to see some, like, it's just old wood. You know, we know that as well as anyone. And again, I think I showed this picture last time. I love this picture, the bogwood. And here's the, and she even got some wood to stick down here. It is very light and it's a bit old. And the colours are brown and gold. It's by Ellie Murphy, I think. It's great and different. And I love this stuff because, you know, it's these kind of values that kind of escape the archive. So I love the idea that someone went home that night and maybe their parents said, you know, what did you do today? And she went, well, you know, I saw some really old wood. And I just love that. We can't capture that information. I think that's really important. And here's another weird thing that came out of some of the work with Rosie on Wet Futures some years ago. We did this work with as part of Creative Nation, with the Drum in Bog group in Ireland. Another artist friend of ours made these lino cut prints, one of which is sphagnum, and that's what pomegranate's that? Well done, yes, take a well done. And what we didn't know at the time was, again, was for the kids, and they loved it, and the parents joined in doing the prints, and everyone got good in there. But then, about a month or two later, we got something through the post, and it was this. And someone had gone, it was one of the Boris lace makers, who Boris lace is a particular form of Irish lace making. And they made some sphagnum lace. And they sent this, I genuinely think this is like an academic peak where you go, like, for once, like, I've not stood for conference and talks about sphagnum curves or, you know, like the Kelowna curve. But someone came and went away and did that. And they sent it us, and I was like, oh, do you want it back? Like, no, you can have it. So that's big. We have written a bit about this in another context. How art inspired by peatlands. Can it help us confront the current present? I don't know, but we have to do this, don't we? We have to kind of, you know, talk this way and have hope and try and think about how some of these ideas that link heritage and climate and restoration, you know, how they might help us. You know, and that's always important. And I'm going to leave you with this. So again, to go back to Palasport, to kind of loop things back round. In the early days of the Palasport project, we held a figurine workshop at Mathamara. So Mark had been doing some carving, and we had discussions about some of these figurines, and I particularly said, well, you know, could anyone make one of these? So the idea was, let's have a workshop. So we invited some artists from Cork, but not woodworkers. So we invited a ceramicist and a poet and painter. And everyone spent the day with tools, some replica tools, and bits of wood making figurines. We kind of talked about them. And we ended up with some fantastic. Mine was rubbish. I'm not going to show you. But what was really interesting was the creative people, whatever that means, did a much better job. And that's just some kind of interesting discussion. Another paper that's coming out about that, and the idea of kind of creativity and woodwork. Does anyone work wood? We've got any woodworks in the room. So anyway, we had these figurines, and we didn't know what to do with them. So in the end, I can't remember who suggested it. It might have been Brian. So, well, why don't we just go and guerrilla deposit them somewhere? So this is in 2020. So we found located a wood in West Cork, and we took them there. There's about 5 or 6 of them, and we stood them up just off the path in the woodland. We kind of left them, and we were kind of, this is interesting. I wonder how long they'll last. And what was remarkable is I kind of go back occasionally, and we got this desire line had developed off the main path. So people were going into the wood to go and look at these weird figurines, and kind of group of them all stood around like a little conclave. And you can see that this wasn't there before. So people were going to look at these figurines, and you know, who knows what discussions went on. And what was interesting is how long they lasted there. So this was last year in November. Jim Leary actually was over, and we went for a field trip, and we went down back to the woods, and they've all got, there's one left that was lying in the grass. The desire line is kind of grown over. And again, I love this because it feels to me like the most important things, the most important metrics, they always escape the archive. We can never quite capture them. I think that's the beautiful thing about archaeology, but it's also the one that perhaps is kind of the hardest to represent in a sense, and I think that's maybe the way it should be. So I am going to leave you with that thought. Thank you so much for having me. Feel free to fire questions or comments at me. Thank you.